Hi guys, and welcome back to Slice of Mike. Today I'm talking about the books that I read in the month of July. It's pretty much become the case that every month there's at least one book that I absolutely despise, and I don't know if it's because I'm becoming intolerant of certain books or certain writing styles, or if I'm just reaching outside of my comfort zone, so I come across things that are riskier in terms of my reading habits, if you know what I mean. So because I'm on the topic of hating books, and I'm talking about the book that I didn't like this month, I'm gonna start this wrap up with the book that I disliked the most out of any books I've read so far this year and in a very long time. And that is Final Girls by Riley Sager. What a disappointment. But basically this is a thriller that a lot of people on BookTube were looking forward to. I know a few of them have read it and they enjoyed it, and I was looking forward to it because of the concept, which is basically like you have your main characters and they're all part of these horrible massacres and mass murders. They're the last survivors, so they're the final girls, and it's about them coming together and forming relationships and trying to move on in the wake of these horrible events that have happened to them. Basically, my main reasons for not liking this book are, one, I didn't like the characters. I thought that they were very uninteresting to read about. They were archetypes, they were boring. None of the decisions that they made any sense to me. But you know, the thing about thrillers is that you have to keep reading until the end because of course there's a major twist and you need to know basically who done it at the end of the story. And I stuck around and I read it because I did want to know how it ended. And ultimately the ending just didn't make up for my utter lack of interest for the rest of the book. I would not recommend this book to people. I mean, I've always thought that every book has an audience, and I know some friends, some BookTube friends have enjoyed this book, but it's just at the point where I disliked it so much that I wouldn't want to take the risk and assume that somebody might like it, because in my opinion, the chance is greater that you're not going to like this book. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the other books that I read in the month of July, and I can assure you that none of them are as divisive as the one that I just talked about. The next book that I read in the month of July is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the, let's call it, sci-fi romance series that she's currently writing, and I don't know if it's going to have a sequel, but I really do hope that she continues to write about the characters in this series. This is mostly a standalone book. There's a character from the first book in the series that is the main character, the focal point of this book, and a lot of the characters from the first book don't show up in this book. So there is a little bit of overlap, but I honestly don't think that you need to read the first book to be able to enjoy and understand this book, although they're both great, so I encourage you to just read them both and read them in the order that they were published. This series is so funny to me because I've never read anything like it, and it doesn't seem like it's super outside of the box. So I'm surprised that nothing like it has come across my path. I'm sure there are other books in the sci-fi romance category, but I've just never read anything like it before. So the first book was your introduction to the author's world, and you got to learn about all the crazy aliens and planets and cultures that are all around you in this world. So the first book was a bit more fun in that regard because you're just learning about it for the first time. This book was like dipping your toes back into familiar waters, and it was fun, and you learn a little bit more about other elements of the world, but it wasn't quite as adventurous, it wasn't quite as mind-expanding as the first book. So in that regard, I was a little disappointed, but I still thought it was a really fun book. Highly recommend both books in the series. That's it. The next book that I read is Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari, and this is a book that I've been trying to read for a super long time. It's been on my list. I've known about it for decades, it seems. As a single person, as somebody who dates very actively and very aggressively, I don't know, that doesn't sound good, but I date a lot, and I have a lot of opinions about dating, especially dating in the city and dating as a millennial. So this book was right up my alley. I wasn't really expecting it to be that informative. I know a few people that I've talked to about this book, they found the book to be disappointing because, number one, they were expecting more anecdotes from Aziz's life. They thought it would be a book about his dating experiences tied in a little bit with dating in the modern world in a larger context. It's mostly about general dating. It's not really about the author per se, although he does talk a little bit about himself and how he met his current girlfriend. It's not a very complex book. I think the main takeaway is that modern dating has both pros and cons. It can be frustrating, but it also provides more options and more ways to immediately contact people that don't live near you. It's good and bad, which I kind of already knew going into it. So it felt familiar, but it didn't really feel instructive, and that's fine. And I liked it. The end. The next book that I read is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is a book that I was drawn to because Sam from Novels and Nonsense is such a Robin Hobb fan. I have never met a person more excited about an author and their books than I have seen Sam get excited about Robin Hobb's books, which is great because when somebody's super passionate about an author's books, it makes me really want to pick them up. This book reminded me of Game of Thrones, but not really in the way that you would expect. It reminded me of that series because this book starts pretty quietly. You get a decent picture of the world, you get acquainted with a few characters, and you're kind of dropped into this one part of an extensive overworld, so to speak. But then towards the end of the book, you learn that there are other countries involved, there are other species that you haven't met, there are legends and myths that people start to talk about towards the end of the book that you can probably tell are going to relate to the plots of the later books in the series. So it's like Game of Thrones in the sense that you can see where it's going, but it doesn't drop everything on you at once because that can be really intense, it can be really extreme and hard to get into. I'm very excited to see where this series goes. I bought the second book in the series, which is called Royal Assassin. As soon as I finished this book, I had to have it. The next book that I read is Willfare by somebody whose name I forgot to look up before starting this video. Alicia Gray Painter, that's who wrote that book. The main character is the owner of a hotel in Los Angeles. Her parents own this huge, like really weird hotel franchise where every hotel has something strange and over the top about it. So the hotel where the main character works, which is called the Willfare, every level of this hotel has a different architectural theme. And they're built so haphazardly that they're kind of starting to tip over, or at least that's how it's described. There's also a Ferris wheel in the hotel. There is a dip bar with like 500 different dips that people can try. The thing about this book is that it is so bizarre. The tone of voice is unlike anything I've ever read before. Like, the closest thing would probably either be Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams, just in the way that almost every sentence is a joke in itself, and the book constantly makes fun of itself. Like, it's just very strange to read. The one thing that really had the potential to make me hate this book was the dialogue, because the characters say things that are ridiculous and that nobody would ever say because they're so full of affectations that you know that you're not reading something that people would actually say in real life. So in the beginning, it was very distracting to me because I feel like in order to enjoy this book, you have to turn off the part of your brain that's like, this is ridiculous, because the whole book is just ridiculous. This is another book that I had to buy the second book in the series as soon as I finished the first one because it's just so bonkers and I need to know where it's going. And I might end up hating the series, but honestly these books are available for like $2 for Kindles or in the ebook format. So there's really no downside to buying this book because it's so cheap. The next book that I read is Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. This is the first book in a series about a girl who lives in a superhero family in, I guess you could call it a post-apocalyptic America, but basically life goes on. So there's a new society that rises in the wake of a war that people don't really talk about or know a lot about because the government's trying to suppress information. And in this new world, there are superheroes that suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and people kind of know what happened. There was a solar flare event, but nobody really knows how it led to the creation of all these superheroes. The main character in this book is named Jess, and she is part of a superhero family, although she does not have superpowers of her own. And yes, that is a trope. I was thinking it when I read this book. I know you're thinking it now. There's no getting around it. That's something that has happened many times before in superhero fiction. The main thing that drew me to the series is that Jess, the main character, is bisexual, and this is written for a middle grade audience, and I'm trying to actively seek out books with LGBTQ characters in middle grade fiction and in young adult fiction. So this is a book that I just read about online. I haven't really heard that much about it, so I wanted to pick it up and see if it was something that just wasn't getting the attention that it deserved. And I know that there has been kind of an ongoing conversation on BookTube. I can't think of any specific videos at the moment, but people have been talking about whether or not it's valid to just highlight books and give the spotlight to books that have underrepresented characters just based on the merit of that it contains characters that you don't often read about. I do see the validity of that because while I didn't really enjoy this book, I think somebody else will enjoy this book and will really connect to the characters in this book. And especially after doing a video like the one I did a few weeks ago that was me talking about the first gay book that I read, I can totally imagine a young girl or a young guy going to the bookstore and seeing this book and picking it up and really connecting with the characters in a way that they've never connected with any characters in books or media before. I do think it is worth talking about on my channel, and I didn't dislike it by any means. I just didn't think it was like super fantastic or life-changing. There you have it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. If you've read any of the books that I talked about in today's video, please leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you all again very soon. Bye.